My fiancé banned my daughter from our wedding while including his 4 kids, so I gave him a wedding gift he didn't expect. We're in the middle of planning this big wedding. I'm not going to lie, it's kind of overwhelming but also exciting, you know. Adam and I have been together for a while, and blending our families has been a wild ride. He's got 4 kids from his 2 previous relationships, twin girls who are 7, another daughter who's a preteen, and his youngest, a 5-year-old son. I've got my little girl, who's 5 and just started kindergarten. So, yeah, we've got a lot of kids in the mix. Honestly, until now, things had been going pretty smoothly with the kids. Adam's always been big on treating everyone equally, which is a huge deal for me. When you're blending families, that's what you hope for, right? So, we've been managing this whole one big happy family thing pretty well until the wedding planning kicks off. We're going through all the usual stuff, venues, food, colors, whatever, and we finally get to talking about roles for the kids. Adam's super excited about having his son be the ring bearer, and he's already picked his 3 daughters as the flower girls. When he first mentions it, I'm like, okay, that sounds cute. But then it hits me, my daughter's not included. Now, I get it, Adam's got more kids, and maybe he just hadn't thought about it. But still, I want my daughter to be a part of the wedding too. She's my kid, and it would mean the world to her to be included in some way. So, I bring it up casually, like, hey, wouldn't it be nice if my daughter could be one of the flower girls too? Adam doesn't even think about it, he just straight up says, no. At first, I think I must have misheard him. Like, why would he just say no? So, I try again, just to make sure, and he repeats, no, 3's enough. I don't get it. We're talking about our wedding, and I'm asking for my kid to be a part of it, just like his kids are. It's not like I'm asking to rearrange everything or kick his kids out of the wedding or anything. I just want to add one more flower girl. So, I ask him, why not? It's not that big a deal, right? And he just shrugs and says, it wouldn't work. That's it, no explanation, no discussion, just it wouldn't work. I'm trying to keep calm because I don't want this to turn into an argument, especially since we're still in the middle of planning everything else. But I feel like he's brushing me off over something that should be an easy yes. The thing is, my daughter is at that age where she's all about princesses and dressing up. You know, like, if she sees a fluffy dress or a tiara, she's obsessed. So, being a flower girl would be a huge deal for her. And it's not just for her, it's for me too. I want her to feel like she's part of this big day, especially since she's going to be stepping into this blended family. I tried to explain this to Adam, but he's just sitting there, giving me this blank look. I can see he's getting annoyed, but I keep pushing a little because it's important to me. I tell him that including her is a small thing that would make a big difference. But he just sighs and says, you're making this a big deal over nothing. Alright, now I'm starting to get frustrated. It's like he's not even hearing me. I get that he's got more kids, and I totally respect that his kids are a big part of his life. But it's not like I'm asking for the world here. I'm just asking for a spot for my daughter, one of the flower girls. I mean, if this was any other event, he'd be cool with it. But for some reason, he's shutting me down hard on this. By this point, I'm starting to feel a little hurt. It's like he's making it a his kids versus my kid thing, which isn't what I'm going for at all. I'm not even trying to make it complicated. I just want to feel like my daughter matters as much as his kids do on this day that's supposed to be about us. But he's acting like I'm trying to start some family drama. So, I decide to back off for now. I mean, maybe he's just stressed with all the planning, or maybe he's got some reason he doesn't want to explain right now. But in the back of my mind, I can't shake the feeling that he's being weirdly stubborn about this, and it's not sitting right with me. I try telling myself it's just a flower girl spot, it's not the end of the world. But honestly, it's more than that to me. This is about my daughter feeling like she belongs in this new family. It's about her looking back on the wedding photos one day and feeling like she was a part of it. I don't want her to feel like she was on the sidelines at her mom's wedding just because she didn't happen to have the same dad as the other kids. So, yeah, I'm stuck in this weird situation where something that should be simple is suddenly turning into a huge question mark. I'm trying not to let it spoil the excitement of the wedding planning, but every time I look at those flower girl dresses online, I just feel a little off. It's like I'm excited for the wedding, but there's this nagging feeling in the back of my mind, like, why isn't this a no-brainer for him? I don't know, maybe I'm overthinking it, but at the end of the day, I can't help but feel like this should have been an easy yes. The fact that it's not just has me second-guessing things a little, and I hate that. A few days go by after that whole awkward conversation with Adam about the flower girls. I decide to let it go for now, figuring maybe he just needs time to come around. But as luck would have it, that's when my daughter catches wind of the flower girl plans. She overhears the twins talking about being flower girls, and her face just lights up. I mean, she's a kid hearing about dresses and petals and getting to walk down an aisle. She's all in. She turns to me with this huge grin and says, "Mom, I want to be a flower girl too." Just the way she says it, like it's the most obvious thing in the world, makes my heart both happy and, well, a little sad, honestly, because I know how that conversation went with Adam. Now, I could have just tried to distract her or pretend like it's not a big deal, but this isn't something she's going to forget in 2 minutes. So, I decide to try bringing it up with Adam again, thinking maybe this time he'll see how much it means to her and to me, if I'm being honest. Later that evening, I sit him down. I tell him my daughter heard the twins talking, and now she's really excited about being a flower girl too. I'm hoping this will be the thing that finally clicks with him. Like, come on, seeing a little kid's excitement should melt anyone's heart, right? But nope, he just sighs and says, "Look, 3 flower girls are enough. We don't need more." I tell him she's really looking forward to it and that it would mean a lot, and he just gives me this look, like I'm being pushy. I'm trying to keep my patience here because I know how sensitive weddings can be, and I don't want to start another argument. But seriously, I can't wrap my head around why he's so against it. I tell him again that it's a small thing that would make her really happy, and he just cuts me off, saying, "It wouldn't work." I'm starting to see red at this point, but I try one last angle. I tell him that adding her isn't taking anything away from his kids and that all the girls can do it together, no problem. But he just snaps at me, saying, "It's not a big deal. You're making this way too serious." I feel like I just hit a wall. It's like he's not even considering how important this is to me or to her. It's like he's already decided she doesn't get to be a part of it, no matter what. And then he drops this line on me, something like, "I thought we were past this, my kid, your kid stuff." Excuse me? My kid, your kid? I'm literally sitting here trying to make my daughter feel like part of the family. Isn't that the whole point of us getting married? It's like he's turning it around on me, making me out to be the one who's causing division. I'm so thrown off by his attitude that I can't even process what he's saying for a minute. I manage to keep my cool enough to tell him, "She just wants to be part of this, Adam. It's not like she's asking for the world." But he just shakes his head, acting like I'm being unreasonable for even bringing it up. He says something about how I'm making this a hill to die on and acting immature. The way he says it, like I'm this big drama queen over something so silly, just cuts. I never expected him to react like this, and I certainly didn't think he'd make me feel guilty for standing up for my kid. So, I just tell him, "Fine, I won't push it." But inside, I'm crushed. It feels like my daughter and I are just not as important as I thought we were. Later that night, my daughter asks me if she's going to get to be a flower girl, and I feel this lump in my throat. How am I supposed to tell her that her excitement doesn't matter, that she doesn't get to be included? So, I try to keep it simple. I tell her we're still working on the details, that nothing's set in stone yet, and she kind of nods, looking a bit disappointed. It breaks my heart. She's a little kid who just wants to feel special, and I feel like I'm failing her by not being able to make that happen. The twins, of course, are still all excited and talking about it non-stop, and every time they bring it up, I can see my daughter's face fall a little. She doesn't complain, but I can tell she's feeling left out, and that just eats at me. Over the next few days, I keep thinking about what happened, replaying it in my head. I wonder if I could have said something differently, tried harder to make him see my side. But honestly, it feels like he's already decided, and it feels like there's something deeper there, something he's not telling me. It's like he's got this line in his head, this unspoken rule that his kids are official and my daughter's just there. It's hard not to feel bitter about it. I mean, we're supposed to be building a life together, right? A whole family. I want my daughter to feel like she belongs here, like she's not just tagging along in someone else's family. And Adam not wanting to include her in something as special as the wedding, the one day that's supposed to be about us all coming together, makes me question how things are really going to work once the honeymoon phase is over. But I tell myself it's just a minor setback, that maybe he's just stressed with the wedding planning or maybe he's nervous and doesn't want things to get too complicated. So, I try to push down those nagging doubts and focus on the other parts of the wedding that we're both excited about. Still, there's this knot in my stomach every time my daughter brings it up or looks at me with those big, hopeful eyes. I hate that I don't have a real answer for her, and I hate even more that Adam doesn't seem to care. It's a lousy feeling. Honestly, I thought he'd see how much it mattered to me, to us as a family, but now I'm not so sure we're on the same page. After a few more days of awkward tension and no real resolution about the flower girl issue, I decide I can't keep quiet about it anymore. I've been bottling up my frustration, trying to convince myself that maybe I'm overthinking or that maybe I just need to let it go. But every time I see my daughter's face drop a little whenever the twins talk about being flower girls, I feel a pang of guilt. I shouldn't have to explain to her why she's not allowed to be a part of her own mom's wedding. So, one night, after the kids are in bed, I bring it up with Adam again. I try to approach it calmly, like, look, I know you're set on the 3 girls, but I really think we should find a way to include my daughter too. Before I even get the whole sentence out, he lets out this big sigh, rolling his eyes, and says, are we seriously still talking about this? That right there just lights a fuse in me. The eye roll, the tone, like I'm this annoying person for even caring about my kids' feelings. I try to stay calm and tell him that, yes, I still think it's important, especially since my daughter is now looking forward to it. He cuts me off with, it's just not necessary, alright? Why can't you let it go? Let it go? I feel myself getting heated, but I try to explain myself. I tell him it's not just about the wedding, it's about her feeling like she's part of the family. This is supposed to be a day where we're all coming together, and leaving her out just doesn't sit right with me. But instead of understanding, he just snaps back with, you're making this way bigger than it needs to be. They're just kids, they won't remember who was or wasn't a flower girl. Now I'm just shocked. I'm standing there, trying to explain why this matters to me, and he's acting like I'm asking for the moon. I say, it's a big deal to me, and it's a big deal to her. I don't understand why you're so against it. And that's when he says it, the line that makes everything crystal clear. Maybe it's a big deal to you, but I think you're making it a my kid versus your kid thing, and I don't appreciate that. I'm taken aback. My kid versus your kid? I didn't even know how to respond. I'm literally trying to include my daughter, not separate her. I tell him that I want her to feel like she belongs, like she's part of this family, and he just gives me this cold stare and says, you're being toxic, you know that? It's this mentality that's creating problems. Creating problems? I feel like I'm in the twilight zone. I'm trying to figure out why he thinks that me asking for my daughter to be part of our wedding is somehow causing a divide. I tell him that, if anything, leaving her out is what's making things feel split. But he's not even listening. He just crosses his arms, standing there with this look of frustration, like I'm exhausting him. You know what? I say, finally feeling fed up. I don't understand why you're acting like this is some massive request. She just wants to be included. Why can't you get that? And then he laughs, actually laughs, because, it's ridiculous, he says. It's ridiculous that you're so hung up on something as small as this. I'm treating everyone equally, but you're the one making it a big deal. I can't believe what I'm hearing. I tell him, it's not treating everyone equally if my daughter doesn't get to participate. This is our wedding, shouldn't she feel like she's part of it too? But he just waves me off, saying I'm blowing things out of proportion. Why are you choosing this hill to die on? He snaps, like he's completely over it. It's not fair to keep pushing and pushing just because you want her to have some special role. I'm not budging on this. Hearing that from him, I'm not budging, just hits me in a way I didn't expect. It's like he's drawing a line in the sand over something I thought was a given. I mean, I thought we were a team. I thought he'd understand that including my daughter was just as important as including his kids. But he's looking at me like I'm the one who's being unreasonable. At this point, I'm hurt and, honestly, just mad. I tell him, if this is how you handle something so small, what's it going to be like when there's a bigger issue? How can I trust you to have my back if you're not willing to consider something that matters to me? He scoffs, crossing his arms even tighter. Oh, don't make this into some grand thing about trust. This is about you not respecting my decisions. Now I'm the one rolling my eyes. I tell him it's not just his decision to make. This is our wedding, our family, and my daughter deserves to be included in something this important. But he's already checked out of the conversation. He shakes his head and says, you're just being petty. That word, petty, stings more than I thought it would. I feel like he's dismissing me and everything I'm saying, like my feelings and my daughter's feelings don't matter. So, I tell him, if caring about my daughter's place in our family is petty, then maybe I am. But I'm not going to just sit back and let her feel left out. He just shakes his head, like he's disappointed, and says, I can't believe you're making this into such a drama. I don't even know what to say anymore. I'm standing there, stunned, while he walks off, like he's done with the conversation. I feel like I'm alone in this, fighting for something that shouldn't even be a fight. I thought planning this wedding would bring us closer, make us stronger as a family, but now all I feel is this growing distance between us, and it's honestly terrifying. As I stand there in the empty room, I realize this argument isn't just about a flower girl spot anymore. It's about how he sees me, how he sees my daughter, and maybe even how he sees our future. And for the first time, I start to wonder if maybe this isn't what I signed up for after all. After that fight, I start questioning everything. You know when you replay conversations in your head, trying to figure out if you're the one who missed something? Well, that's been me for the past few days. I keep going back to all the things Adam said, and honestly, it's making my stomach turn. It's not just the flower girl thing anymore. Sure, that's what started it, but now I'm thinking about the bigger picture, the way he brushed off my feelings, the way he laughed, like I was being ridiculous for standing up for my kid, and that whole your kid versus my kids line he threw at me. It felt like a slap in the face. I keep wondering, if he's reacting this way over something as small as adding one more flower girl, what's it going to be like when we hit actual problems? Blending families isn't easy, and we both knew that going into this. I figured we'd face challenges, but I thought we'd tackle them together. Now, though, I feel like I'm starting to see a side of him I didn't notice before, or maybe I just didn't want to see it. Over the next few days, every little thing starts standing out to me. Like, when we're all hanging out with the kids, he's so quick to jump in and play with his kids, joke around, make them feel special. And don't get me wrong, that's great, I love that he's a good dad to them. But then I notice he's just distant with my daughter. Maybe I was blind to it before, but now it's all I can see. For example, his daughters will ask him something, even something silly, like, "Can you help me with my doll's hair?" And he'll go all in, doing whatever they need, laughing, making them feel seen. My daughter will ask him a similar thing, and it's like he barely hears her, just a quick yeah, and maybe a distracted pat on the head before he goes back to whatever he was doing. I've tried to ignore it, thinking I'm reading too much into it, but now that I'm looking, it's pretty clear. And here's the thing, my daughter's starting to notice too. She hasn't said anything outright, but I can tell. She looks a little sad when he doesn't pay attention to her or when he laughs extra loud at something one of his kids says but barely acknowledges her. She's only 5, but kids aren't dumb. They know when they're being left out, and as her mom, it just guts me. I keep trying to remind myself that he's stressed with wedding planning, that maybe he's just tired or preoccupied. But then I remember his words, "I'm not budging on this," like his decision was final, no room for compromise or understanding. And that hurts because I thought marriage was supposed to be about finding common ground, about supporting each other. But here I am, feeling like I'm fighting this battle on my own, and he's on the other side. I think back to how things were when we first got together. He was charming, caring, the kind of guy who made me believe in this whole blended family dream. He'd say things like, "Our family will be one big team," or "I'll always treat your daughter like my own," and I believed him because that's what I wanted for her, a dad who'd love her, make her feel safe and valued. But now, I'm starting to think that was just talk. The other day, we were at the park with all the kids, and I watched him playing with his son, lifting him up, spinning him around, making him laugh. Meanwhile, my daughter was off to the side, playing in the sand by herself. She looked over a few times, probably hoping he'd invite her in, maybe include her too, but he didn't even look her way. And that's when it hit me, this isn't just about the flower girl thing. This is about her feeling like part of his family, and right now, she's not. I try to bring it up again, one more time, thinking maybe if I approach it gently, he'll understand where I'm coming from. But as soon as I start, he just shuts it down. He's got this tone, like he's annoyed with me, like I'm making his life difficult by even suggesting that my daughter should feel included. He tells me, "You're reading too much into it. Can we please move on?" Like I'm the one being irrational. And that's when I start to seriously wonder if this is what I want. Is this the guy I'm supposed to spend the rest of my life with? Someone who brushes off my concerns, laughs when I try to stand up for my kid, and refuses to even consider compromising? I wanted this wedding to be the start of something beautiful for us, a new chapter where we all come together as one family. But instead, it's feeling more like a warning sign. It's not an easy thing to admit to myself, but I can't ignore the feeling in my gut anymore. I want a partner who will stand by me, who will make my daughter feel like she belongs just as much as his kids do. But every conversation we have about this makes me feel like that's never going to happen with him. I start thinking about the future, holidays, birthdays, big family events. Will it always be his kids and my kid? Am I signing my daughter and myself up for a life where she's always left on the sidelines, where her place in the family is always second to his kids? And honestly, I don't want that for her. I don't want her growing up feeling like she's somehow less than just because her mom didn't marry her dad. She deserves to feel loved, included, and valued. And right now, I don't think Adam can give her that. So, yeah, I've been having some major second thoughts, and it's tearing me up inside because I love him. I do. But I can't ignore what's right in front of me, and I can't keep hoping he'll change when every sign is pointing to the fact that he won't. For now, I'm just taking things day by day, trying to figure out what's best for my daughter and me. But the more I think about it, the more I feel like maybe this isn't the happily ever after I thought it would be. So, here I am, days away from what's supposed to be my wedding, and I'm realizing that maybe, just maybe, This isn't what I thought it would be. It's honestly heartbreaking because I didn't get this far to throw it all away. I've invested my heart, my time, my dreams of what a family could be. But then again, I didn't sign up for a life where my daughter would be treated like she's on the sidelines or where every little thing about her inclusion would turn into a fight. A few nights ago, I couldn't sleep. I lay there, staring at the ceiling, just turning everything over in my head. I kept asking myself, can I really do this? Can I marry someone who doesn't seem to care how this affects my daughter? And I realized that if I'm having these questions now, that's a massive red flag. I mean, yeah, wedding jitters are normal, but this isn't about nerves. This is about my kid, my little girl who's looking up to me to make choices that keep her safe and happy. The next morning, I wake up with this heavy feeling in my chest. Adam's already up in the kitchen, making coffee, like it's any other day. I stand there, just watching him for a second, wondering if he's even feeling the same doubt that I am. But the truth is, he doesn't seem bothered. He's just going about his day, like everything's fine, like we didn't have some pretty intense arguments about this whole flower girl situation, or like he didn't tell me flat out that my feelings were petty and ridiculous. I realize I can't keep this all bottled up anymore. I have to get it out, or it's going to eat me alive. So, I take a deep breath and sit down across from him at the table. I don't even know where to start, so I just say, we need to talk. He looks up, surprised. About what? He asks, like he doesn't already know. So, I lay it out. I tell him I've been having second thoughts. I tell him that this whole thing with my daughter, the way he's been so against including her, has made me question if this is really the right choice. I say that it's not just about a flower girl role, it's about how he sees us as a family, and right now, it feels like he's not willing to meet me halfway. He sits there for a minute, and I can see his jaw tighten. I can't believe you're letting this ruin everything, he says finally, and his tone's sharp, like he's annoyed with me. We're so close to the wedding, and you're just what, second-guessing everything because of one little thing? That phrase, one little thing, just about sets me off. I tell him that it's not one little thing to me or to my daughter. I explain, probably for the 100th time, that this is about making her feel like she's part of this family, like she's valued and included, but he just shakes his head, like I'm missing the point. Look, he says, leaning back in his chair, I'm not saying I don't care about your daughter, but I already made decisions for this wedding, and I don't feel like I should have to change everything just because she wants to be a flower girl. There it is, the final nail in the coffin. It's not about my daughter, it's about his decisions, his way, his unwillingness to even consider bending for her or for me. I realize that this is how it'll be every time there's something important to me that he doesn't want to deal with. He'll shut it down, brush it off, or make me feel like I'm asking for the world when really all I want is a place for my daughter. At this point, I feel this weird calm come over me. It's like everything I need to know is right in front of me. I don't want to keep arguing or begging him to understand where I'm coming from. If he doesn't get it now, he's never going to get it. I look at him and say, Adam, if we can't agree on something as simple as making my daughter feel included, how are we going to handle the big stuff? How can I marry you knowing this is how it'll always be? He just looks at me, like he's at a loss for words, but not in a way that shows he understands, more like he's fed up with me, like I'm wasting his time. He doesn't say anything for a moment, then finally just mutters, I can't believe you're throwing this all away over one little thing. Hearing him say that again, I feel my heart break a little, but I know I'm making the right decision. If he can't see why this matters to me, why it matters for my daughter, then what's the point of going through with this wedding? I stand up, my hands shaking a little, and I tell him, I'm not throwing anything away. I'm choosing what's best for my daughter and me. And then I walk away. Packing up my things and telling my daughter that we're not going to be living here anymore is probably the hardest part. She doesn't fully understand, but she asks me, is Adam still going to be my daddy? And that question just about tears me in half. I tell her, no, sweetie, but we're going to be okay. She's young, so I know she'll be alright, and I know I'm making the right choice, but it doesn't make it hurt any less. Walking away from a relationship is always hard, but it's harder when you had all these hopes built up around it, hopes for a happy family, for a fresh start, for a real partnership. The thing is, deep down, I know that I can't settle for someone who doesn't see me or my daughter as a priority. We both deserve more than that. And if Adam can't handle something as small as making my daughter feel included in a simple wedding role, then what else is he going to shut us out of? As I close the door behind me, I feel a strange mix of relief and sadness. Part of me still wishes things could have been different, that he could have seen what I was asking for as something small but important. But I also know that wishing for someone to change isn't the same as them actually changing. And right now, my daughter and I need someone who's all in, not someone who's only half there. So, yeah, that's where I ended up, choosing my daughter over a man who couldn't see her worth. I don't know what's next for us, but at least I know I made the right decision. It's been about a week since I called off the wedding. I've been trying to settle back into some kind of normal, mostly focusing on my daughter and keeping my mind off everything that went down with Adam. But then, just as I'm starting to feel like I can breathe again, he shows up at my place. I open the door, and there he is, looking all serious, like he's got something important to say. My heart's pounding because I honestly don't know what to expect. Part of me wants to slam the door in his face, but the other part of me, well, I guess I still want to believe he can change, even after everything. So, I let him in, telling myself I'll give him a chance to talk, to explain himself. We sit down, and he starts off with this big sigh, like he's carrying the weight of the world. He says, "I've been doing a lot of thinking, and I realized maybe I was a little too harsh." He says he misses us and regrets the way things ended, and for a second, I feel this tiny spark of hope. Maybe he's finally seeing things from my perspective. But then he starts adding these little conditions, turning the apology into a list of things he'd want me to change. He says stuff like, "I just don't want you to keep pushing these issues about your daughter. It's exhausting to feel like everything has to revolve around her." He actually says that. Right there, I feel my heart sink. I tell him, "She's my daughter, Adam. She's 5. Of course she's going to be a priority." He just nods, doing that sighing thing again, like I'm being difficult. Then he goes, "I get that, but you have to meet me halfway here. You have to stop bringing up all these issues about her feeling included in every little thing. It just makes things more complicated than they need to be." I'm sitting there, stunned, trying to process what he's saying. He's apologizing, but only if I'm willing to agree to not push for my daughter anymore. He says things like, "I want us to be happy together, but you need to understand that we can't keep revisiting this stuff every time she feels left out." At this point, I'm getting pretty fed up, but I try one more time to get through to him. I say, "Adam, it wasn't just little stuff to me. This was about making her feel like she's part of our family. I want us to be a real team, not just me and her on one side and you and your kids on the other." He just looks at me, like he's waiting for me to finish my speech, and then he says, "See, this is what I mean. You're too focused on making everything perfect for her, like it has to be all or nothing. It doesn't have to be so extreme. Just let things happen naturally." Let things happen naturally? I repeat, trying not to raise my voice. So, naturally, she's excluded? Naturally, she just takes a backseat to your kids? Adam shifts in his seat, clearly annoyed now, and he says, "It's not about her being excluded. It's about you not needing to control everything. Just let her be part of things when it works, but stop trying to force it." At that point, I feel this weight settle in my chest. I realize he's never going to see her as part of his family, not in the way that matters. He's so focused on making sure his kids stay comfortable that he can't even consider what it would mean for my daughter to feel like she belongs. He goes on, saying, "I love you, but if we're going to make this work, you have to let go of some of this control. I can't have you questioning me every time I make a decision about my kids." There it is, plain as day. He's saying he wants things to go back to how they were, but only if I agree to back off when it comes to my daughter. He's not even trying to understand where I'm coming from. He just wants me to fall in line, to ignore the things that hurt, and accept that my daughter will always be a little bit less in his eyes. I take a deep breath, and I finally tell him, "Adam, if that's what you think a family is, then I don't think I can be part of it." He looks at me, surprised, like he wasn't expecting me to actually say no. "What are you saying?" he asks, his voice softer, almost like he's worried I might actually walk away. So, I tell him, as clearly as I can, "I'm saying I'm done. I can't marry you if this is how it's going to be. I can't be with someone who doesn't see my daughter as part of his family." He tries to argue, saying I'm throwing everything away over one issue, but I just shake my head. I tell him, "It's not one issue, Adam. It's the fact that you see her as an extra, as something you're dealing with, instead of someone you want to include." He keeps trying to convince me, saying he didn't mean it that way and that I'm overreacting. But by now, I'm done listening. I've spent too much time hoping he'd come around, hoping he'd understand what it means to truly blend families, and now it's clear that he just doesn't. Finally, I get up, open the door, and tell him, "I think it's best if we don't see each other anymore. I need to focus on what's best for my daughter, and that's clearly not going to happen here." He stands there for a moment, looking like he's trying to come up with something to say, but he doesn't. He just looks at me, shakes his head slightly, and walks out the door. I close it behind him, feeling this weird mix of sadness and relief. I loved him, and part of me still does, but I can't love someone who doesn't love my daughter the way she deserves. As I lock the door, I feel a sense of peace settle over me. It's not going to be easy moving forward, But at least I know I made the right decision for my daughter and me. She deserves a family that makes her feel included and valued, and if I have to create that on my own, then so be it. Here's the thing. I'm not exactly my family's pride and joy. I never have been. You've got my sister, Jessica, the total golden child, practically perfect at everything she touches. Then there's me, struggling to get a small business off the ground, barely keeping up with the bills. My parents, well, let's just say they've always been a little more invested in her success than in mine. Typical, right? Growing up, Jessica was always the one who could do no wrong. She had straight A's, went to the right schools, landed a good job right out of college, and then started her own business that just took off. Here I was, scraping together savings, pulling ridiculous hours, trying to keep my small shop alive. My store's no high-end boutique or anything. It's just a little place where I sell handmade stuff and whatever other creative things I can manage to pull together. To be real with you, I was struggling, not exactly the cash cow my family hoped for. But hey, I was making an honest go of it. I guess that doesn't matter when you're comparing yourself to a sister who's basically a hometown success story. Things started getting bad for me after a few rough years in a row. I'd had some bad luck with suppliers, lost a couple of big orders, and then COVID hit. Honestly, my business never really recovered after that. I tried everything to keep the place going, new products, discounts, promos on every social media channel I could think of, but nothing was working. I was watching my business fall apart piece by piece, and I was barely holding it together. So, at my lowest, I finally decided to ask for help. Not exactly a proud moment, but you do what you have to do, right? I thought my family might understand since they'd always preached about helping each other out. Guess I was wrong. When I went to my parents, they basically told me to suck it up and figure it out on my own. They said something like, if you can't make it work by now, maybe it's time to rethink things. Real encouraging, right? But Jessica overheard, and she swooped in with an offer. She had that I'll save the day look on her face, which already put me on edge. She said if I was serious about fixing my situation, I could come back home and work for her business while staying rent-free with her and her husband. In return, she'd front me some cash to help keep my shop open. I'm not going to lie, I was desperate, so I considered it. But I also knew Jessica well enough to know that nothing is ever that simple with her. She loves being in control, loves being the one people turn to when they're in trouble. I could already imagine her using this favor to lord over me forever. But my options were limited, and the thought of saving my shop made it seem worth it. So, I said yes. Moving back into my hometown felt like a slap in the face. Here I was, nearly 30 years old, dragging myself back to my family because my business was crumbling. Meanwhile, Jessica was living in this beautiful house with her perfect little life. It was like I'd stepped into a reality show where I was the before and she was the after. The moment I walked in, my mom was on me about how I could have done more with my life if I'd just followed Jessica's example. I kept my mouth shut, though, because, honestly, I needed them. Jessica wasted no time putting me to work either. She had me doing all kinds of random tasks for her business, inventory, packing, running errands, stuff that had nothing to do with why I was there. It felt like she was showing off, like I was supposed to see how successful she was and feel grateful that she'd even thought to help me out. Maybe I was supposed to feel embarrassed, but mostly, I felt angry. I'd expected some tension, we'd never exactly been close, but this was something else. I swear, every time she'd help me, it came with this little jab. She'd say stuff like, I know it's tough for you, with that fake sympathetic look, or, maybe if you'd planned better, things would be different. I just kept swallowing it because, again, I had no choice. I needed that money if my shop was going to survive. After a couple of weeks, Jessica finally came through with the money. She transferred a chunk into my account, and for a split second, I thought maybe she was actually doing something decent. I didn't ask any questions, I just took it as a lifeline. I thought, okay, maybe I can make this work, get back on my feet, and then I can finally get out of here and back to my life. But something didn't sit right. Every time I'd bring up my business, she'd get this smug look on her face, almost like she was waiting for something to go wrong. I brushed it off as just her usual attitude, but then the weird stuff started. One day, I went to pay a bill for my shop, and the transaction was declined. I checked my account, and every cent was gone, not just the money Jessica had transferred, but all the funds I'd managed to scrape together, completely wiped out. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. I called the bank in a panic, thinking maybe it was a mistake or some kind of fraud, but the bank guy on the other end just tells me calmly that the money had been transferred out and that there was nothing suspicious on their end. I spent hours on the phone trying to track it down. I didn't understand how this could happen. That's when it hit me. Jessica had my account info. When I moved in, she'd helped me set up everything, even insisted on handling some of my paperwork. She had every single detail about my finances, which meant she could move money around however she wanted. It was all starting to click, but I still wasn't ready to believe it. I mean, I knew Jessica could be petty, controlling, even, but stealing from me? That was a whole other level. I kept telling myself it couldn't be true, that maybe I just misplaced something or missed a payment. But deep down, I knew better. She was capable of more than just being a pain. I knew it, but I didn't want to admit it. So, I waited, hoping maybe there'd be some kind of explanation, maybe even an apology if she'd made a mistake. But instead, I got the opposite. The next morning, my mom came storming into my room, yelling about how I was a disgrace to the family. She called me a thief, said I'd betrayed everyone. Apparently, Jessica had gone to my parents with proof that I'd been stealing money from them to fund my failing business. She made it sound like I'd just been using everyone this whole time. I barely even processed what was happening. I was in shock, just standing there, listening to my mom go off, calling me a liar and worse things I'd rather not repeat. The only thing I could think was, why would she do this? That was when I realized Jessica never intended to help me. She'd set me up from the start. After my mom's blow-up, I barely had time to collect myself before my dad got involved. He came storming in, demanding to know where the money was. There was no talking, no chance to defend myself. It was just accusation after accusation. They had it all mapped out in their heads. I'd come back to mooch off Jessica, I was using everyone to keep my failing business afloat, and now they finally saw my true colors. I felt trapped, like everything had already been decided before I even opened my mouth. And Jessica? She stood there, leaning against the wall with her arms crossed, looking calm and concerned, like she was the victim here. It was so perfectly staged that I almost believed her myself. She had evidence, some printouts, probably showing the money that was transferred into my account and then back out, and she handed it all over to my parents, all wrapped up with her little narrative about how I was taking advantage of the family. But it was worse than just my parents being mad. They were disgusted. They looked at me like I was the lowest scum on the planet. My mom even said, "You know, I always hoped you'd turn things around, but now I wish we'd never helped you at all." I can still hear her words echoing in my head. I felt like I was sinking, unable to catch my breath. So, they packed up my things. I didn't even get a say in it. My mom went through my stuff, tossed everything in a suitcase, and told me to get out. I watched in silence, completely stunned. They wouldn't even let me explain that the money Jessica had given me was supposed to help me stay afloat. Every time I tried to say anything, they'd cut me off, saying, "Don't make it worse for yourself." In the middle of it, I tried to look at Jessica, just hoping she'd have some flicker of guilt or something, but she wouldn't meet my eyes. She kept her gaze on the floor, probably to keep up her innocent act, but I knew it was because she couldn't look at me. She knew exactly what she'd done. When they were done throwing my stuff together, my dad handed me a bus ticket out of town. He told me I wasn't welcome back, that I was a shame to the family. It hit me that they weren't just kicking me out, they were cutting me off completely. My whole life, I'd been on thin ice with them, and this was the last straw. It was only when I stepped out of the house that it all really hit me. I'd gone from barely hanging on to being completely left with nothing in less than 24 hours. And what's worse, this was all her doing. Jessica had set me up, lied through her teeth, and made me look like a criminal just so she could look like the good one in the family. She was the one who wiped my account. She was the one who put all the blame on me. And she got away with it. The first night, I stayed at some rundown motel on the edge of town, trying to figure out what I was going to do next. It was cheap, which was the only good thing about it. The bed was lumpy, there were stains on the walls, and the whole place smelled like a mix of bleach and regret. But I couldn't afford anything better. I lay there, staring at the ceiling, replaying everything in my mind, trying to make sense of it all. How could Jessica do this? I mean, yeah, we weren't close, but this was something else. It wasn't just jealousy, it was like she'd planned this from the start. I thought back to all the little comments she'd made, all the digs about my business failing and how I didn't plan well enough. She'd been laying the groundwork for weeks, maybe months. It was like a sick game to her. The next day, I tried to call my parents. I was hoping, maybe, just maybe, they'd come around if I could talk to them without Jessica around. But they didn't answer. I left voicemails, sent texts, even tried calling from a different number. Nothing. They'd completely cut me off. It felt like a punch to the gut, realizing that they'd written me off just like that, without even giving me a chance. At that point, I didn't know where else to turn. My friends were mostly out of state or tied up with their own lives, and I didn't want to drag them into this mess. Plus, let's be real, I was embarrassed. Admitting that my own family had turned against me was like confessing that I'd failed on every level. I mean, who gets kicked out by their own parents at almost 30? Eventually, I decided to find work nearby and just try to rebuild, no matter how slow or hard it was. I knew it wasn't going to be easy, but what choice did I have? I started hitting up local businesses, looking for anything that would pay, even if it was just enough to cover food and rent for a tiny apartment. My pride was already in shreds, so I wasn't above taking whatever job I could get. It was a rough few weeks. There were nights where I barely ate, days where I was so exhausted from job hunting that I'd just collapse on the couch of whatever friend's place I'd managed to crash at. I felt like a ghost, moving through the motions, just trying to survive. The hardest part was knowing that all of this was because of Jessica. Every struggle, every bit of humiliation I went through, all because she'd decided to screw me over. And the worst part? My parents weren't just mad at me, they genuinely believed I was some kind of thief, someone who'd steal from their own family to keep a dying business afloat. They'd fed off every word Jessica had said, every proof she'd given them, like it was gospel truth. No questions, no doubts, just straight up belief in her story. And Jessica? She was probably sleeping like a baby, with my family none the wiser. One evening, after another brutal day of job hunting, I sat down and just let myself be angry. Up until then, I'd been hurt, I'd been desperate, but now I was just mad. It wasn't fair that she got to go on with her life, playing the hero, while I was left scraping by. And the worst part was, she'd done it so smoothly, so flawlessly, that no one even suspected her. It was like she'd thought of everything, every tiny detail. But I made a decision that night. I wasn't going to let her win, not completely. If my family didn't want me, fine. If they believed her lies, that was on them. But I wasn't going to just disappear quietly. I was going to get back on my feet, with or without them, and one day, they were going to realize the truth. It wasn't much of a plan, but it was enough to keep me going. One thing I knew for sure, Jessica might have gotten her way this time, but it wouldn't be forever. After a while, I guess I just got used to scraping by. When you're forced into survival mode, your priorities change fast. The first few weeks after getting kicked out, I was too busy trying to get food on my plate and keep a roof over my head to think about anything else. I mean, it wasn't like I was homeless, but I was definitely one bad day away from it. I landed a few odd jobs here and there, mostly stuff like handing out flyers on the street, helping out with events, that sort of thing. Nothing permanent and definitely not enough to pay for an apartment. But eventually, I caught a break at this small bakery. They needed someone to help out with morning shifts and cleaning, and I jumped on it. Was it my dream job? Not by a long shot. But it was honest work, and I needed every cent I could get my hands on. The first few weeks at the bakery were tough. I was waking up before sunrise, scrubbing floors, cleaning out ovens, even dealing with customers who seemed to think I was their personal punching bag. I won't lie, I felt humiliated. I went from being a small business owner with my own place to being the girl wiping tables in a bakery that barely even covered my basic bills. But I was determined not to let it break me. Over time, I settled into a bit of a routine. I'd work mornings at the bakery, then spend the afternoons at the library or on my phone, scouring job boards and trying to figure out a plan to get myself back on my feet. I spent hours researching everything from business grants to job training programs. It was exhausting, but it kept me focused. In some strange way, it was like having a project to work on, and I needed that, something that reminded me I still had a future, that I wasn't just this failure my family had branded me as. Every now and then, I'd get this pang of anger thinking about Jessica. I mean, here I was, basically starting over from scratch, while she got to live her cushy life, looking like a saint in the family's eyes. But I pushed those thoughts down because, honestly, it didn't help. Anger wasn't going to pay my rent or help me get my life back. I had to keep my head down, focus, and keep moving forward. No one was going to come save me, that much was clear. One day, I was helping a customer who'd come in every week like clockwork. He was this older guy, real friendly, always had a story to tell. I guess he saw something in me because, out of the blue, he asked, "What's a smart girl like you doing working in a bakery?" I shrugged it off, but he kept pressing, and before I knew it, I was telling him the short version of my story. I didn't get into all the drama with Jessica, but I mentioned losing my business and having to start over. Turns out, he was some retired business owner who'd seen it all. He gave me a few tips, told me about some free local business workshops, and even introduced me to a few people he thought might be able to help. That was a turning point for me. I started going to those workshops whenever I could, learning everything I'd done wrong with my shop and figuring out how to avoid those mistakes if I ever got another chance. Little by little, I started feeling like maybe I wasn't as much of a screw-up as I'd thought. About 6 months in, I got my first break. One of the guys I'd met through the workshops worked at a hardware store and mentioned they were hiring for some basic sales positions. It wasn't glamorous, but it was a steady paycheck. I went in for the interview, and I guess they could see how badly I wanted it because I got the job. The hardware store was a whole different world from the bakery. For one, I was working regular hours, and I even got weekends off. But more than that, I was learning again. I threw myself into the work, learning everything there was to know about tools, repair supplies, you name it. Before long, I was the go-to person for all the tough customer questions. The manager noticed my effort, and I started getting more shifts, a little more responsibility. It felt good, like I was finally doing something that mattered again. I won't pretend I was rolling in money, but I was finally stable. I saved up every extra dollar, started paying off the debt that was left over from my failed business, and even managed to put a little aside each month. I was rebuilding, piece by piece, and for the first time in a long time, I felt proud of myself. It was nothing flashy, but it was mine. Around this time, I heard through a mutual friend that Jessica was still talking about me. Apparently, she told some people that I was ungrateful and didn't appreciate the help she'd given me. She was spinning this story like she'd tried to save me, and I'd just thrown it back in her face. I guess she needed that narrative to feel good about herself, to keep up the image of the perfect sister. The old me would have been furious, but I just shrugged it off. I knew the truth, and that was enough for me. The hardware job wasn't exactly my dream either, but it was teaching me skills I'd never had before, and I started seeing possibilities I hadn't considered. I thought maybe I could stay in retail, maybe work my way up to a manager role someday, or even start a small handyman service if I could get some tools together. My whole perspective was shifting. It was like I'd finally learned that I didn't need my family's approval or validation to succeed. I just needed to keep showing up and putting in the work. In the evenings, I'd go home, make myself a simple dinner, and plan out my next steps. I still didn't have much of a social life, but I was okay with that. This was the first time in a long time that I felt like I had control over my life. I wasn't depending on anyone else, and I wasn't looking for handouts. If I failed again, it'd be on me, and I'd be okay with that. Slowly, I started reconnecting with a few friends I'd drifted away from. They didn't know the full story, but they knew I'd been through a rough patch. They were supportive, and it felt good to have people around me who weren't judging me or comparing me to my sister. They respected me for who I was, even if who I was wasn't perfect. It made me realize that maybe I'd put too much importance on my family's opinion in the first place. Not everyone saw me as a failure. Looking back, those months working at the hardware store, taking things day by day, were like therapy for me. I started seeing myself as someone who could succeed on their own terms, without needing to prove anything to anyone. I was healing from all the garbage my family had thrown my way, and I was finally finding some peace. By the end of that year, I was no longer that person who'd left home in shame. I'd rebuilt my life from scratch, and yeah, it wasn't perfect, but it was honest. I could look at myself in the mirror and actually feel proud, knowing I'd done it on my own. So, there I was, going about my new routine and feeling like I'd finally reached some peace. And then, just like that, Jessica found a way to bulldoze her way back into my life. One day, out of nowhere, I get a message from Jessica's husband. I hadn't heard from him in ages, and honestly, I never even considered him someone I could count on. He was always just Jessica's husband to me. So, I open the message, and it's this long-winded paragraph about how he doesn't know who else to turn to and how they're going through a rough patch. I was just sitting there thinking, is this real? Now you reach out? At first, I ignored it. I figured they were in some minor argument or he wanted advice on how to deal with her attitude or something. I mean, why else would he reach out to me? But he kept messaging, saying it was serious and that he needed my help. I was torn because, on one hand, I'd worked hard to cut them all off, but on the other hand, curiosity got the best of me. So, finally, I caved and agreed to meet him. We arranged to meet up at a little cafe halfway between our places, and when I walked in, I didn't even recognize him at first. He looked rough, like he hadn't slept in days, eyes all bloodshot and twitchy. I almost felt bad for the guy. I sat down, and he wasted no time jumping into this whole mess about how Jessica's business was tanking and she was in some serious trouble. He said she was mixed up in some shady stuff and that if things went bad, they could lose everything. I was still in shock. Jessica's business failing? It was hard to imagine, but I guess it made sense. She was never as perfect as everyone thought, and honestly, I'd always wondered how she managed to keep up that successful image. But then he dropped the real bomb. She'd been accused of selling counterfeit goods. He even mentioned that the police had been asking questions. Now, here's the part where I was supposed to feel sorry for her, right? Except I didn't. I actually felt this twisted satisfaction knowing that her whole perfect world was cracking, just like mine had. But what really got me was when her husband asked me if I could help her. Help her? I laughed louder than I should have, probably because a few people looked over. He looked so desperate that I almost felt bad, but the irony was too rich. After everything she'd done, after turning my family against me, he wanted me to help? I flat out told him, she's got a lot of nerve thinking I'd help her after what she put me through. He looked down, like he'd expected that response, but then he started talking about how she was different now, how she was stressed, that she was barely keeping up and that she was struggling to keep her business alive. He even tried to guilt-trip me, saying that helping her would mean helping the whole family. If she goes down, they all go down, he said. I had to fight the urge to roll my eyes. I told him, I think they made it clear I wasn't part of the family a long time ago, but he wasn't done. He said something that really made me pause. He told me Jessica had been lying to my parents for years, not just about me, but about her whole business. He said she'd been using family money, convincing them to invest in her business while hiding the fact that she'd been selling knockoffs. Apparently, she'd made up this story that she was importing exclusive, high-end products, and my parents had been funneling money her way because they thought they'd be getting a cut of her profits. They thought she was a success story, but she was using their money to fake it the entire time. I was stunned. Here I was, trying to rebuild my life from scratch, and my sister was living off family money, lying about her entire success. And now that her lies were catching up to her, she was hoping I'd come back and save her skin. My first instinct was to just walk out right there, but I held back. I wanted to hear every single detail about her mess. Her husband went on to explain that things had gotten so bad, she was facing real legal consequences. If the counterfeit products were traced back to her, she'd not only lose her business but possibly face charges. He didn't say it outright, but it was clear, if Jessica went down, the family's reputation would take a massive hit. And here he was, practically begging me to help smooth things over with my parents. I sat there, trying to process everything. I'd spent so long being the black sheep, the disgrace, the one they'd shoved aside, and now they wanted my help. They wanted me to come back into the fold and clean up Jessica's mess. I told him flat out, I don't owe her anything. She made her bed, let her lie in it. He was silent for a moment, like he finally understood how deep the betrayal ran. Then, almost like a last-ditch effort, he said, look, maybe if you spoke to your parents, they'd listen. They'd give her another chance. And that's when I lost it. I leaned in and told him exactly what they had said to me when I was kicked out, the words that had haunted me since. They looked me dead in the eye and called me a disgrace. They told me I wasn't welcome back, that I was nothing to them. So, if they're looking for a savior, they should look somewhere else. His face turned pale. I think he realized that there was no winning me over, that I was done with all of them. He tried one last time, almost whispering, please, she needs you. The family needs you. I stood up, threw a few bucks on the table for my coffee, and looked him dead in the eye. No, she didn't need me when she was setting me up, and they didn't need me when they shipped me off with nothing. So now, I don't need them. I walked out without looking back. There was no way I was going to let myself get dragged back into their chaos. I'd built something out of nothing, found a way to survive on my own, and I wasn't going to let their guilt or desperation pull me back. I went back to my life that night, feeling lighter. For once, I'd stood up for myself against them without any of the fear or shame I used to carry. I'd finally closed the door on that chapter, and I wasn't going to let them open it again. I thought that walking out of that cafe would be the end of it. I'd shut the door, burn the bridge, and finally put my family and Jessica out of my life for good. But as fate would have it, the universe wasn't done with my sister just yet. A couple of weeks went by, and things were pretty much normal on my end. I'd go to work, save what I could, and focus on rebuilding. I figured my family would eventually realize that Jessica's life was crashing down around her, but that wasn't my problem anymore. She'd done enough damage to me, it was about time she dealt with the fallout on her own. Then, one day, out of nowhere, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. Normally, I don't bother with unknown numbers, but something made me pick up. It was my mom. Just hearing her voice threw me off for a second because, up until now, they'd all been radio silent. She launched into this sob story about how the family was in crisis and how Jessica was really struggling. I could almost hear the desperation in her voice, like she was barely holding it together. Turns out, Jessica's problems were a lot bigger than her husband had let on. The investigation into her counterfeit business had gotten serious, and the authorities were all over her case. It wasn't just about her business either. Since my parents had invested a lot of money in her success, they were now under scrutiny too. Apparently, the family assets were at risk of being frozen, and they were looking at potential fines or worse. Mom was practically pleading with me to understand, saying that they were all in this together and that the family needed to stick together. I almost laughed. For years, they treated me like an outsider, like some kind of failure, and now that their golden girl was crashing, they suddenly remembered I was part of the family. I kept my cool and let her talk, but honestly, every word was just making me angrier. She said things like, "We're all hurting, and Jessica made a mistake, but she's still family." The nerve of it. They didn't even care to hear my side when Jessica had set me up, but now that they were the ones paying the price, they wanted me back in the fold. When she finished, I told her flat out, "You all made your choice. You threw me out without a second thought, took Jessica's side without question, and now you want me to come back and play happy family? Sorry, but I'm done." She was quiet for a moment, and then she started crying, really laying it on thick. I think she thought I'd cave if she showed a little emotion, but I wasn't falling for it. I told her, "You should have thought about all this before you decided I wasn't worth a second chance." I hung up after that and felt this massive weight lift off my shoulders. They'd made their bed, now they could lie in it. And I was perfectly fine watching from the sidelines while they dealt with the mess Jessica had created. Over the next few weeks, word got around about Jessica's situation. Small towns have a way of making everyone's business public, and soon enough, everyone knew. People started whispering, questioning her success, and the clients she'd once bragged about disappeared almost overnight. She'd gone from being the it girl to the subject of every local gossip session. One day, I ran into an old friend who still kept in touch with some mutual acquaintances. She told me that my parents' assets had been temporarily frozen because of Jessica's investigation. Apparently, my parents were panicking, trying to salvage what they could, but their reputation was already shot. They'd gone from being one of the most respected families in town to the center of a scandal. Part of me felt bad, but mostly, I felt a strange satisfaction. They were all getting a taste of what they'd put me through, the feeling of being betrayed by someone you trusted, the shame of public humiliation. It was like karma had decided to pay a visit, and I was sitting front row, watching it all go down. Jessica's husband tried reaching out a few more times, probably hoping I'd have a change of heart, but I ignored him. I'd given them my answer. I wasn't about to get pulled back into their mess, especially not for someone who'd gone out of her way to ruin my life. Besides, they had made it clear what they thought of me when they kicked me out. Now it was my turn to make it clear that I wasn't coming back. And then came the cherry on top. One day, a mutual friend from the workshops I'd been attending mentioned a business grant program for small business owners who had overcome adversity. She said it almost like a joke, like, "Hey, you'd probably qualify for this after everything you went through." I laughed it off at first, but then I thought, why not? I had nothing to lose. I applied, figuring it was a long shot, but a few months later, I got the news, I'd been awarded the grant. The money wasn't huge, but it was enough to give me a fresh start. For the first time since my business had collapsed, I had real hope. I decided to start a small online shop with the grant money, focusing on handmade items. It wasn't much, but it was mine. No family ties, no strings attached, just me, finally building something on my own. I didn't tell anyone in my family about it. They'd already done enough damage, and I didn't need their approval or validation. This was my second chance, my redemption, and I was going to do it my way. Since then, I've put my heart into making this business work. I've learned from my mistakes, from every painful experience they put me through, and honestly, I'm grateful for it now. If Jessica hadn't betrayed me, if my parents hadn't turned their backs, I might still be wrapped up in their toxic mess, begging for their approval. Instead, I was free to live my life without their judgments, without constantly feeling like I had to measure up to someone else's standards. I don't know what's going to happen to Jessica and the rest of them, and I don't particularly care. From what I've heard, her legal troubles are far from over, and my parents' finances have taken a big hit. They're all tangled up in each other's lives, dragging each other down, and I'm finally out of it. Sweet, sweet karma.